China changes fast. Everybody says this. It's one of the dominant cliches of our time. But few people really have an understanding of what this change really means or what it actually entails. I'm talking to someone today who does understand this rapid change in China, or at least as well as anyone, because he has experienced it directly. His name is Robert Kelly. He's one of the co-authors of Lonely Planet's China Guidebook. Hey, Robert, how you doing?
Hey Wade, doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for showing up and talking to me today.
All right.
First of all, to start this talk off, can you give us a little explanation of what your travel guide research like really entails, and what does this look like when you're going out and researching these places for the guidebooks? What does it actually look like?
Okay. Well, I mean, you've got a lot of stuff beforehand that you have to go over. Briefing and all sorts of things. You look at the previous chapter, the previous work that somebody did. So you have kind of an idea how long you need to spend in each place, because that's one of the things you really when you do these guides, you really have to be careful with your time. You may have a city with 5 million people, and you figure you've got 3 days to cover it. And it's actually not impossible, because this city may have 5 million people, but people only go there for one thing, perhaps they go for one museum, right? So you look at all these things, like what's there, how many hotels do I reasonably need to include, how many restaurants, so what areas, I'm not going to cover like all the hinterlands, all the suburbs of every city. So but when you do China, basically, every 2 years we would go back and we would, cover the same areas. And, a lot of the time, especially for the last couple times I went, I did it, I guess 4 times, the China guide. The last 2 times, pretty much nothing that, that I'd seen the time before was still around. I mean, the hotels were gone, or perhaps, they weren't that good anymore. They run down so quickly, or just simply new areas and new hotels had sprouted up, and they were, the same price. Like you'd have this, 15-year-old hotel for 200, yuan, and then you'd have a brand new one for the same price. Of course you're going to stay at the new one. So on the ground, you have this thing like, okay, I can spend 3 days in this place. That's my time schedule. And then you get there and everything's different. And of course, the first thing you do is you look at the guide and you're like, okay, I'll stay at this hotel. I'm taking the bus and I'm gonna check out this hotel because it's been in the guide for 10 years. And you think this is probably a stalwart of the hotel scene, and I need to check it out. And then you get there and you're like, yeah, this is pretty good. And like I said, and then you start walking around the neighborhood, and then you find these new neighborhoods that have opened up and these new places, and you're like, well, these are even better. And you have this real dilemma, because you have this the schedule that you obviously have some flexibility, but you can't spend months and months on in one town. You can't even spend a couple of weeks in one town. So that on the ground you're constantly assessing what was there, what's always been there, what's new, and also, are these new areas useful? How long is it going to take to get there? If somebody's going to if there's a transit town, transport town, okay, and maybe there's a beautiful area a few kilometers away, but nobody needs to stay there. So you're just making all these sort of decisions really fast, and China's unusual that very little remains, like from edition to edition, especially like for I did Tibet a couple of times, the Tibet guide. And, this is one of the things where, like, you include these restaurants in these, tiny towns, from, Lhasa basically down to Nepal. And, they would never be there 2 or 3 years later, because most of the time you'd have these people from Sichuan who would move to these places. They'd get all sorts of incentives from the government to, open up a restaurant. They'd work for a couple of years and then they would leave. And then another, Sichuan couple would come and open up a restaurant, give it a different name, probably have the same menu, but, it'd be a different name, and you'd have to, find that name. And sometimes that's really hard too, because, they don't have name cards and they don't have the name outside.
Plus you're dealing with a lot of new people moving into areas too, so you can't even be like, hey, I went to this place 2 years ago. Do you know where it is?
Exactly. Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I was in Shenzhen on the other side.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people that you meet, like taxi drivers,
Hmm.
they're not from that area.
Hmm.
They don't know the place. I mean, you're really
Hmm.
lucky, if you do find one, because they often can be,
Hmm.
they can be great. But yeah, I mean, or, like sometimes the train station moves. That happened to me. I think it was Xining
Hmm.
in Shanghai.
Hmm.
And I arrived there, and I've got to catch the train on
Hmm.
from there. I think it was going to Incheon, and there was now two train stations, and nobody really knew which train mine left from. The taxi
Hmm.
driver is like, well, this is this main station, so he takes me to
Hmm.
it, and then I get in there, and it's almost like a like a ghost station. There's barely
Hmm.
anybody working there, and I finally find somebody who can tell me what's going on, and they're like, oh no, yeah, the station's moving, so most of
Hmm.
these long distance trains now are going from there, and I have to get on another taxi and go all the way across town to this place.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so there's a lot of like these changes. There's a lot of
Hmm.
basically stations in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
Especially the high speed rail. I guess 4 years ago, when the rail line, the new C trains, would come out, and the new D trains, and the really super high speed ones were running. And I thought, well, I was coming from Taiwan, and I took the ferry across from Jiman Island to Xiamen, and I
Hmm.
thought, I've got to go to Gansu, and I'm basically just going to take the high speed rail as far as I can, and then take the
Hmm.
trains across China rather than fly, which is
Hmm.
normally I would fly to save time.
Yeah.
And so from Xiamen, I take the ferry across, and then I get a taxi from the terminal, and the guy takes me out to the high speed rail station, and it's in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
and it's almost like it's built on this this podium. It was the
Yeah. Yeah.
strangest sight, because all the ground around it had been sort
Hmm.
of depressed. I guess eventually they're going to fill it in and do
Hmm.
something with it. So you have this big depression with a podium, and then a high speed rail station on top.
Hmm.
And I arrived
Yeah.
there, and I didn't, I figured I'm going to a high speed rail station. I don't need to bring, water and food and that kind of stuff. And I
Hmm.
arrived there, and there's nothing.
Hmm.
There's no food.
Yeah.
There's like one little convenience store that sells like those bizarre crackers, that you get, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's really difficult for me to like fathom how difficult of a task like updating these guidebooks are. Because you're talking about changing in China, it's not just like the hotel is going to change a name, or a street's going to change a name. You're talking
yeah,
like entirely new cities that are being built, and entire sections, entire districts of existing cities that are being completely wiped off the map.
right.
And just the scale and scope of this changes is like beyond like anything that most people can really fathom. And to have to go out and go to places that you've been to before, that really the place itself doesn't exist anymore. That's
Yeah,
just, man,
yeah.
that's just absolutely fascinating.
I
I
mean,
mean,
probably,
you've been able to see this change happen.
yeah, and especially because I mean, I wasn't getting, like the big tier one cities, and then tourist sites. I mean, I was going mostly, to Hainan and to Qinghai, and Gansu, and Dongbei, like the big area in the north that we used to
Hmm.
call Manchuria. Those are the areas that I was doing. So I mean, I was seeing like,
Hmm.
yeah, these cities that 10, 15 years ago, especially like in the
Hmm.
north, were nothing. They were just this sort of wasteland, this really depressed, economically depressed region. And now, like you arrive in places like Changchuan, and it's just massive blocks, like, I mean, just 6 lanes across, and beautifully landscaped, and just I mean,
Hmm.
that was the most astonishing thing to me, was these
Hmm.
new districts often looked really nice.
Hmm.
And that's something that you don't expect. You most
Hmm.
of the time, the travelers, you stay in these older areas. Whether because that's near the train station, or because the guidebooks tend to send you there. But a lot of these new areas are really beautiful. I mean, like they have beautiful parks, and tree-lined streets, wide sidewalks, and and just really like lovely new architecture.
Hmm.
And so for me that was really interesting, and there was always this dilemma, like, okay, do I send people out to this new area, but maybe there's nothing they can actually do there.
Hmm.
Maybe there's no hotels that open
Yeah,
yet,
yeah.
or maybe there's one, or sometimes these hotels. I mean,
Mhm.
where I think it was Jaegwan. I stayed in a hotel, and they were literally still working on it.
Hmm.
And it was so unfinished that one night I'm lying in bed and I smell smoke, kind of cigarette smoke coming in my room, and I'm thinking, okay, it's not coming in from the air conditioner. It seems to be like just literally like in my room, right? So I'm kind of looking around, and it's like, okay, it smells like it's coming from the corner. So I walk over to the corner and I kind of pull back the curtain, and literally there's like about a 2-inch gap between the wall, like between the one wall, like where it comes on a on a T, right? And I could literally look into the other room.
Uh-huh.
Because I guess there's like the molding for the wall
Hmm.
will eventually go over this sort of crack, these
Uh-huh.
where basically where the two walls sort of join, right? But they hadn't
Hmm.
bothered to put it in, or it was too, they figured, okay, well, it's good enough, we can open this hotel and make money. And I'm literally
Yeah.
like, shit, and I look and I can like see the person in the next room like lying on his bed smoking.
Hmm.
you know?
He
So
sees you peeking into his room like some kind of
exactly, yeah, and he's like,
or something.
yeah. It was like,
He thinks you're the one that has a problem.
exactly, yeah.
What's wrong with this guy?
But it's funny because I'd be like, well, sorry, man, but like it's not a hole in the wall; it's like an actual 6 foot crack. So you see a lot of
There's no wall.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no joint between the walls, yeah.
Hmm.
So you see a lot of funny stuff like that, and
Yeah.
Jaegwan was interesting because when you come into town, you go through this new section first, which is really beautiful, and there's this giant statue. I guess it's like a what do you call it, like an obelisk kind of thing. And on the top of this obelisk, and this is like Jaegwan's the end of the Great Wall. It's in the basically almost the Gobi Desert. And there's this giant obelisk with a dolphin on it. And so, and then I'm like, okay, this is pretty interesting, but then, the bus takes you into town and, the places where you actually stay, where the restaurants are, that's like the old section. But you have, so I thought, well, I'm here. I mean, I have to check this out, so I went back to the, to the new section, and I basically just decided at this point there wasn't enough, to, recommend that people stay there. I mean, simply, like there weren't enough hotels, there weren't enough restaurants, especially restaurants. There's a couple hotels, but you don't want to eat in your hotel or restaurant. And you're too far from the bus station. So there's a lot of those sort of things. That these new areas, they're probably way more attractive, for tourists to stay. But they're not. They don't have the infrastructure yet, or to basically go. But sometimes they do, and sometimes they change really fast. And. So that basically for Jaegwan, I just mentioned the dolphin, because it was like I just said, in the transport section, as you're leaving town, make sure you look out for the dolphin.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's a point of responsibility, right? I mean, that what you're putting in this new edition of the guidebook is going to have to be somewhat good for at least the next 2 years. So, I mean, you always have to probably make this judgment. It's like, do I think this is going to be here 2 years from now?
Right.
Or
yeah.
is this? Man,
yeah, and also like the area that the restaurant you're choosing, like is that going to be around? Is this area still going to be lively? I mean, one of the most heartbreaking things was in Hainan. I went there 2007 or 2008, I can't remember, for the first time, and it was the first time I was there, and I really wanted to get to know the place, so I rented a bike and I did this sort of 2-week bike trip around the island, and based my, sort of research, all that. And it was beautiful. It was just like the perfect point where, it had good roads, so cycling was really good. And there was, all these little towns, had, basically you couldn't go more than like, maybe like an hour or 2 hours cycling without hitting a little village or town that would have, pretty good restaurant, and places to get, a fresh coconut, for water and that kind of stuff. And it was just perfect. Most of the beaches, were undeveloped, and, you just went through, just gorgeous countryside. And I just came back, raving about it. And I wrote a couple articles about cycling in Hainan. And 2 years later, I'm like, I'm going back and I'm going to do another cycling trip. And I went back to some of these places. There's one sort of like farming valley that led to the highest peak on the island, and all the villages were gone. And then we're talking, like 20 hectare sections that were now just under development. Like there was a hot spring hotel and other things that were being, sort of put up. So I just felt like, well, I don't know what to do now because like here I am, talking about cycling is this great thing to do. And I mean, and so much in 2 years, it had gone from, this little rural, kind of island, with obviously like some, a lot of good infrastructure like in Sanya, but the rest of it was like small towns. And then suddenly it's just every beach, literally every beach had been developed in 2 years, with condos, and beach resorts, which were, from what I checked out, I mean, most of them were empty. And there were like hundreds of hotels and, condos, and I mean, thousands of, condo units being built. And none of them were being used at that point. And it was, and it was heartbreaking because like this, I mean, I have pictures from this valley, from 2 years before, just these golden rice fields, and these, sort of volcanic kind of peaks, in the background. And then 2 years later, like it's all gone. And then this is, I think, 2010 probably. So, this is after the economic, the big, economic crisis in 2008. So China was pouring just, I mean, trillions, of dollars into, in infrastructure and real estate. And so all these villages, I guess, were given the chance, to get buyouts essentially on their property. Yeah. So they were all expanding too. So before you would be, you'd ride on your bike, and you'd reach a village, a few hundred people, and then you'd ride for, a few kilometers and you'd reach another one. And now it's like it was almost continuous village. Like, I mean, it was literally like rural sprawl, which is something you don't really think that can happen. I mean, how, like villages aren't supposed to sprawl, but they were, and they were sprawling so that, one village was almost, joining the next one, because they were both expanding out. Right. And, and this one, one person I knew like on the island ran a B&B was saying, yeah, it was because, they're getting a chance to kind of like, sell the land or I guess be bought out. So they had to build, these, they basically were building on the land to claim it because they couldn't just say, yeah, that's my land. We've had it for, 1,000 years. That doesn't really qualify as title, in China. So there was just, these incredible changes. Boao, which was this, the forum for Asia. It's this big, important, regional kind of forum. That's where they hold it every year in this little coastal town called Boao. And for quite a while, it was kind of like the perfect little town because it had, just essentially two streets kind of on a T. And every year, because of the forum, they would come and they would repaint the whole town, and so it was pretty. I mean, it was a really this sort of really pretty little town, and just restaurants from all over China were there because, for I guess a few weeks you'd have such good business from the conference and then, had enough tourism. And it was just great. It had this great beach, that almost nobody used. It just went on for kilometer after kilometer of beach. And then just like, within 2 years, I mean, just the whole coastline was being developed, with these high rises.
Not just like suburban sprawl, but like real city infrastructure.
Yeah. And I'd go through these villages, like former areas, and they were just like, oh, the coming Hyatt, the coming, Meridian, and they'd be, like 5 acres, just all fenced off, and then and beside them, you'd still have some of these houses. So you'd have these, little, just farming villages, with like a couple stone houses, and patches of cabbages, growing. And then just, this glass and steel and, and shiny marble, Meridian Hotel being built up beside it, and then that was weird, like to see that was probably the most dramatic change was Hainan. Within 2 years, like just, and I think, and what was just the scale basically of the development was so fast and so much that there was a waterfall that, we used to include in the guidebook that no longer existed because they had diverted all the water for construction.
Yeah.
So again, your guidebook writer, you're like, oh, should I go back and check the waterfall? It's like, come on, it's a waterfall. It's it's going to be there. Like, do I really need to go and make sure that the mountain is still standing there? And you do. I mean, like,
really? You do.
I mean, there's places like like in Lanzhou where they they raise the mountains. And there's other places, like even in Hainan, I think some of the smaller peaks I think have been raised as well. And like I said, and these waterfalls were dry. So that's a little tough as a travel writer when you've got to basically find out if the waterfalls still exist.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's you can't take anything for granted,
You
right?
can't exactly.
But
Yeah, you can't think. Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I went to China, probably about 12, 13 years ago. I used the Lonely Planet guidebook. And I got so frustrated with this thing because every time I show up someplace, it wasn't there, it wasn't in their business anymore. And of course, my typical reaction, it was a long time ago, it was when I first started going to China, was like, man, how could this Lonely Planet writer fucking include, this place that doesn't exist, this crappy guidebook? But you just what would you say to me at that point? What would be your reaction? Like how would you explain this to me? Being a typical tourist showing up in China for the first time and using these guidebooks and not seeing things that match in what's in the book anymore.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's happened to me, many times. I've
Hmm.
just said, look, this is an area, of the world that's unique.
Hmm.
Things change so fast.
Hmm.
There are literally, hotels and restaurants and neighborhoods that get bulldozed over,
Hmm.
really quickly. So, I usually kind of make a joke. I said, guidebooks, they don't update themselves.
Hmm.
So basically, there's not like this kind of magic that makes the text rearrange itself. If the hotel actually closes,
Hmm.
and this happens everywhere in the world. I mean, places close, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's that little, at the beginning of the book, I think on the first or second page, they always give that, kind of caveat, like, things change, prices go up, blah blah blah. But there's nowhere. Sorry, just a second. Just a second. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Oh,
Okay, you're talking about
yeah.
responding to.
So, anyways, yeah. So, I just say, like, okay, this is not, you can't, China's a place where things change faster than anywhere else,
Hmm.
and especially, the last 10 years, China's just, been developing at a pace that's,
Hmm.
unbelievably fast,
Hmm.
and one of the things people don't really realize, about, tourism, and also housing is that these are really not very, I mean, how would you put it? They're not actually very free. They're probably some of the least free parts of the Chinese economy, like tourism
Hmm.
and how and real estate, which means they can change. The government has control. I mean, most of the
Hmm.
the travel agents you visit, they've actually gone been trained by people who are part of the Communist Party. They get special manuals how they're supposed to talk about certain things. There's very little sort of just freewheeling parts of the tourism economy. So, if the government wants to change an area, and redevelop it, they will, and they'll do it really fast because they have
Hmm.
complete control over it.
Yeah.
Um, and so the other thing is, like, sometimes, they said, I think that was kind of not a very short answer for it.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think by this point the person would have walked away. Um,
Hmm.
no, okay. Usually I would just say no. I mean, I know the
Hmm.
authors. I know
Hmm.
everybody's there. They're on the ground.
Hmm.
Basically, there's a very good chance the area you went to just simply changed.
Hmm.
And that it's hard to believe, but it does happen really
Hmm.
fast like that in
Yeah,
China.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we we can only, like, update as much as we
Hmm.
when we're there. We can only update when we're there.
Hmm.
One of the things you try to do is you talk to as many people as you can about,
Hmm.
especially like the last few editions when everything's changing. You would talk to
Hmm.
people like, what's new, what's coming along, like, is this area
Hmm.
coming along? You try to
Yeah.
get a sense, like, is this still going to be here in 2 years? Is this new initiative, do you think this is actually going to
Hmm.
go anywhere? you know
Hmm.
maybe they're developing this new river front.
Hmm.
Oh God, that was freaky too. That was talk about changes.
Hmm.
There's this area in, I think it should be Changchuan province, or Jilin
Hmm.
province.
Okay.
It's called Jian. It's right on sort of the North Korean border. So yeah, I think it's the Yalu River,
Hmm.
uh, runs right through there. So literally, like, you sit on the riverbanks, and 100 meters across is North Korea.
Hmm.
And this is just like a pretty small average sized town, probably
Hmm.
50, 100,000 people. And I
Yeah.
guess because of tourism, and then there's really not much. I mean, there was some pretty cool old, early Korean kingdom,
Hmm.
sites, like out in the mountains nearby, and people, some people would go out there. They're actually pretty cool. They're these big stone, this big valley, kind of flat valley, and there's all these huge stone cairns, almost like pyramids, in the valley. And it's like really these are the graves basically of the sort of the rulers of this kingdom, and there's these old crypts, that 2,000-year-old crypts, and so it had some interesting sites, and I guess and the government, after 2008, they were deciding to sort of spread development through tourism to a lot of areas. And so they're looking at like, what does every area have that we could possibly, kind of, develop or exploit, however you want to say it, for tourism. And so Jian is like, well, okay, they have the Korean angle, like the ancient, Korean angle, and also the North Korean, basically, you can the view of North Korea, right?
Yeah.
Which is actually quite popular. So they developed, from one addition to the other, they developed this waterfront, just beautiful. I mean, just, it was all this sort of like, sort of stone and marble, kind of tiling on the ground. These, they built like an artificial lotus pond that had this old Chinese junk in the center, and you could, and they had a rowboat on a rope, so you could pull yourself out to this junk, and you could sit there at night, kind of like drinking wine, pretending you're Levi or something, like looking at the food, and it was gorgeous, right? And then they had, this incredible museum that. Never, I don't think it ever opened. And all the time I went back, I was always told it was going to open, but it never did. But it was beautiful. It was based upon this, this old Korean motif. So kind of like, I don't know, it kind of went up like this, almost like a flower, and had these, huge sort of leaf petals coming out. And then this, this waterfront, I mean, just like fountains, and, beautiful, high rise, like probably, 15-story high rises all around. And this is like, this happened overnight, almost literally. And so, suddenly, as a writer, I'm like, well, I've got to write about this. I mean, this is beautiful. This is like, an incredible, like a lovely, I mean, it's an interesting area because of the history and the heritage. And now you've got this incredible waterfront, that just, you have to go and see. So, but then you're like going, well, yeah, but where am I going to find the words? Because you've got, like a word limit, and all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of thinking like, so, where's this other area that maybe is, was good, and now it's disappeared, that I can swap words with, so that's one of the issues is like,
it's fascinating, because I mean, you see infrastructure like this, like the whole park, the whole developed riverfront, and you just like assume that it's been there for either forever or at least for like an extended amount of time, like decades, and
exactly,
it's not that way in China, because it wasn't like that a year before, right? It wasn't like that 2 years before. I mean, they're moving mountains and just getting rid of waterfalls, and just that concept of change is like, it's something that's like really, really difficult to comprehend or to really understand for people who don't live in China. But for people in China, what's your impression? How would you say that people in China have adapted to this change or gotten used to this change? How do they deal with it?
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I mean, some of the places I go to, I'll meet, like in Hainan, for example, in Boao, when this used to be all farmland, and it was taken away to build the complex for the forum, and most of the people, the farmers, were given, the sort of little, not tuk-tuks, but like the little kind of, electric kind of, three-wheel vehicles, to basically be like little taxi drivers essentially, and they were given like a license, kind of a monopoly on this. And and you'd meet them, and some of them were happy because because they had a monopoly, they had they're making a decent living. Obviously a lot of people were not happy about it. And I guess and especially when the high rises started coming in, that's when I started seeing people pretty unhappy. I was one of the people I became friends with in Boao. Her husband, basically was a writer, and he, very sort of pro-China, my country, everything my country does is great, and we were talking to him one night, and he was kind of, opening up a bit, and he was just like, I don't like the direction, this is about 2009, I guess, I don't like the direction the country's going in, because, they were seeing things, these this area had been zoned for no more than I think like 2-story buildings.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically like like a small kind of not rural town, but it was like a small town. And nothing was supposed to be higher than I think one of the clock towers.
Yeah.
One of these sort of old old rules, and but people basically, the rumors were that Hu Jintao, the former president, one of his cousins, wanted to sort of invest in this area, so they basically just changed the zoning and allowed these literally like 20-story glass and steel high rises. I mean, it looks like Miami Beach. I mean, it just it's completely inappropriate. So because it changed the aesthetics, it changed the integrity of the whole town. And most of these things were empty, of course. So basically, you're losing the charm of your village or your town. To a bunch of outsiders coming in, and buying, a holiday property that they'll stay maybe 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of people I meet, are in tourism. So they're obviously happy when their areas develop, right? They're getting way more business. Like Jion, for example. I mean, like the hotels, we're thrilled, because this waterfront, was bringing in lots more customers. They could raise their prices. All that kind of stuff was happening.
And that concludes part 1 of this interview with Robert Kelly. Please join us for part 2 when we discuss changes in Tibet and the rise of Chinese tourism and backpacking both in China and abroad. Thank you for listening. Wade Shepard, vagabondjourney.com.